Hello, friends. I'm Devendra, your host for the podcast, and you're listening to Life of a Researcher Stories Beyond UI. Hello, friends. Today, in this episode of the podcast Life of a Researcher, we have with us Dr. Preethi Pradhan, Dean of Chitkara School of Health Sciences. She has done Masters in Social Work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has a PhD in Healthcare from IIT Madras. While we both worked at Arvind Eye Hospital at different points of time, I got introduced to her at a workshop that is IXL conducted by LICO that helps healthcare organizations design their own training programs. She was one of the faculties facilitating the workshop. So, Preeti ma'am, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. So I think I can be Preeti for this session. I think that would be totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. You were in full-time job when you started your PhD, right? PhD from IIT Madras. And you were working at a place which is quite busy, and people don't often get time to study anything else or do anything else. So, what were your motivation to do a PhD while working, while on a full-time job, and what are the challenges you faced while doing that?
Um, Quite a life story in a nutshell, kind of a question. But I think there was always within me a desire to kind of study further, and doing a PhD was very much on my mind. So after I joined Aravind, I had cleared my UGC NET entrance exam, and I think it was due to I would say a coincidence, or as we say, destiny, a work of fate that allowed me to understand about the PhD program at IIT Madras, which allows external scholars, which means I could be working full time but yet pursue my PhD with IIT. And this I thought was kind of like the right opportunity because it allowed me to continue my job, which was very important. But at the same time, to also pursue my PhD. IIT has a process wherein they recognize institutions for candidates to do external PhD. So we actually went through. I would say it probably took 1.5 or a certain amount of 1.5 years or so to complete that process. But anyhow, I think I had always, at that point in time, it was not really a choice where I could just study full time and not do a job. So, and having taken up the job, which was definitely very interesting and something I wanted to pursue, I think it was just the whole juggling act of how do you manage everything. So, I think that was how it started.
Mhm. So, ma'am, can you share more about the challenges you faced while doing that? Because you are juggling between the day job and the PhD.
Yeah, so I think it's not just like a dual challenge. I think for women, it's always like a triple challenge because you're also trying to manage your family, and you're managing a job, and you also, I got into a full time PhD, not full time, but a PhD program at IIT. I think it's quite rigorous, and the standards are not really different whether you are a full time or an external. So you've got to kind of meet all those standards and expectations of your guide. So I think when I started my PhD, I was just we were just two, in the sense I was just a newly married person, and as the PhD progressed, I had two children, and both very young when I was going through the PhD process. So it definitely was juggling more than one thing. I feel at every uh, part of what I was juggling, whether it is the PhD and the IIT group, or my supervisors, or at Aravind, my boss, Mr. Tulsiraj, or later Dr. Nachia, or even at the family front, I really had tremendous support. And I think as much as I contributed to each, definitely without their support, all of this a huge undertaking would not have been possible. Huge support, encouragement, motivation, and just the whole balancing thing. I think there's, I mean, there's probably a bit of personal sacrifice somewhere, but then it kind of just, I think, gets erased in the mind. So I can't really kind of bring that up. I'm not able to recollect that bit. But yes, I think Zoom perhaps was not there, but Skype was there, which allowed me to attend certain meetings even if
Mhm.
I was in Madras and carry out my work. So it was balancing, but I think it's all doable if if you really wanted to pursue it. I mean, it was my choice. Nobody told me to take a PhD at that point in my life. It was something I aspired to do, and I think PhD is a very individual journey. There isn't anybody who is actually asking you to complete it. So the onus is on you to kind
Mhm.
of figure out the pathway and the priority to somehow
Mhm.
complete it. So, yeah.
So, ma'am, as you mentioned, you had two young kids while you were doing the PhD. So, how did they take up this thing? Because you would be away for some time for PhD. So, how did they cope up with this, and how did you manage handling the kids? Because this is more than men; it's bigger challenge for women handling this problem.
So one, I definitely had a huge family support. So that is that
Mm-hmm.
is my bedrock. My mother-in-law was staying with us, and between my mother and my mother-in-law, I think the babies were just exchanged between these two very caring hands. So that was one very strong support at the home front. But on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if I had to go meet my guide, from Madurai to Chennai, it's an overnight journey. So it's I would be away for 2 nights or 3 nights. It's not I'm not away for very very long. And the long period actually was for my data collection. So I actually took leave from work. I think it was for a month or so that I took leave. I had data collection both in Chennai and in Madurai. So Madurai it was within Aravind, so that was doable. But the part which had to happen in Chennai at the Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, I actually took leave. I shifted the entire family. So it was during the kids' vacation time. So I was at home in the evenings, but in the daytime I was out collecting the data and all of that part. So the major part I was away was during, yeah, I would say the data collection. I mean, I just had to take leave. So there were certain leaves I kind of probably took about a month for a couple of years or 2, 3 years to kind of just finish work in one go. And the other part is towards the end, again, I had to spend a bit of time away. I think there also I probably would have taken a few weeks off to kind of just sit inside IIT Madras and just finish off the final bits. But otherwise, a lot of it was done via email. You do your work, you send it, your guides get back, or you
Mm-hmm.
travel for a one day, you meet, or there is a research committee meeting you have to attend. So it's not long time away. And I would say, my guides were also very, I would say, very quite nice in the sense that when I was doing my data collection, one of my guides kind of turned up in Madurai on a surprise visit to kind of check on how I was doing the data collection and see my forms, the questionnaires, and all of that. So that was quite nice because he came down to Madurai and checked on how the work was, the quality of the work, and they gave me, the necessary time. So a funny little episode I would like to add here in terms of how the kids took it. So we had at that point there were a lot of I mean besides my two there were other kids from the neighbors. I mean the kids were always together. So one day I found my younger one, my daughter, doing a role play with, one of the neighbors' kids who was also her age. And the role play was between guide and a scholar. So my daughter was saying, okay, now I'll be the guy, you be the... And I was like, oh, what are they? Like little kids will do, I'm the mother and you're the father, or, I'm the sister and the brother. And here what they were doing, I'm so yeah, I thought that was really funny, and then it also made me aware of what I talk at home and what I do at home, and what they're being exposed to. So yeah, that was very interesting. So another thing was for coursework, I had to take sabbatical from my office at Aravind, which again they were very kind enough to permit me. So we kind of again shifted right in the beginning of our PhD to spend a semester in IIT Madras while I completed my coursework. So at that point, I
Mhm.
had my son, my elder one, and I think he absolutely enjoyed the wonderful IIT campus with all its nature, the deer, and yeah. So I think it was very good. They had a wonderful library, a children's section. So I used to leave the kids in the children's section while I
Mhm.
used to go inside to the other part. So yeah, it's a lot of good memories. I think for the family as well. I hope. But yeah,
Mhm. Mhm. So it's like those small little things make job a bit easier for the students, or especially the women doing their PhD or any other long term course. Now coming to the part of gender equity, so your research has been revolving around gender equity recently. So what was your motivation behind pursuing this stream of studies?
I think I've always been interested in gender for sure.
Hmm.
I think in different ways it kind of manifested, wherein, for everything I would think about it from the women's point of view. But I think one of the turning points for me into me becoming far more in this line of work or research is, while at Chitkara University and I became a supervisor, one of the very first scholars I got, she was interested in pursuing a research on gender. So it was very interesting. So I was guiding her, and so that was one bit, that there was a PhD scholar who was under my supervision, and she was doing on gender. But like I said, the turning point was there was a conference which was held at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 2018. Yeah, I had just got on
Hmm.
the social media at that time, and it just on Twitter I saw this little blurb which said that there is a conference on women leaders in global health, WLGH, Women Leaders
Hmm.
in Global Health 2018. And they were offering scholarships for going and attending. And I just like that applied. I didn't know anything about WLGH or anything at that point, but of course I knew about LSHTM. While I was at Aravind, I had the good fortune to meet a lot of faculty from LSHTM who have been working with Aravind on various research projects. And I also got a chance to go to LSHTM and teach. So you have this view of LSHTM as this amazing place. And here they were organizing a conference and
Hmm.
they were offering scholarships for it. So I applied. And
Hmm.
so, and I probably forgot about it. And then it's probably about 3, 4 months later that I got this letter saying that, I am accepted. and it's kind of like a fully paid thing, which is
Mhm.
another amazing thing because they pay for your travel, they pay for your accommodation. I mean, they pay for air registration, everything. So I would say it was more LSTM, LSHTM, the fact that I got a scholarship and it just happened to be this conference that I actually went there. And it was the date of the conference was actually the Diwali of 2018, which is not exactly the greatest date to be away from the family and attend a conference. But I went during that Diwali break to attend this conference. So besides getting the scholarship, they had also invited people to apply to be a mentor, a global health mentor, and that was another thing I had applied for. So I think about they selected a total of about 50 of us to be global health mentors, and I was one of them, and that was another what do you say, something that I felt great about, that I had this opportunity not just to be at the
Mhm.
conference, but to be recognized as a mentor. So they had applications for several people to apply to be mentees and for people to apply as mentors. So I went for this conference, and the very first day when I walked in, this was a massive hall. I think there were close to 1,800 or 2,000 participants in that conference.
Hmm. That's amazing.
Normally, when you go for a conference, the gender diversity is always, I mean, at least the ones I have been to, women tend to be a minority, especially when you have to travel and go to a different place. And suddenly I entered this conference, and it's just, the men were the absolute minority in that place. So out of 1,800, if there were 200 men, I would have been surprised. But so
Uh-huh.
that kind of blew me away. I mean, here is this place, and apparently all these women were working in the broad area of global health.
Mhm.
Several of them in leadership positions, and it was just the most amazing thing. And I think over the next 2 days or 3 days of the conference, the events, evening, the kind of topics that they had, the kind of research that was presented, for me, it was mind blowing, and it was as if I entered into another realm of life, so to speak. There was a session which
Mm.
was
Mhm.
about uh, the, um the title of the session was something like the Dean Talk. And when I went there, the
Mhm.
dean from the Harvard School of Public Health was there, and just and there were people from London School of Hygiene as well, and some of the other universities. And I think it was just mind blowing to kind of listen to the stories that they were sharing about their journey to where they
Mhm.
had reached, and the kind of challenges and how it is they were building their academic institutions. So, I am a dean of a school of health sciences, which I've helped. I work with the management here to kind of start and set it up. And today we have about 4 or 5 departments. So, people were speaking challenges which I was, in one sense, very familiar with. And, if
Mhm.
Dr. Michelle from Harvard School of Public Health could speak about it, it was just, for me, that particular conference was about conversations that usually do not happen in public. Maybe there are things
Mhm.
we, as women, researcher, academicians, we think about, we feel, but we rarely speak about. And here at this conference, there are a lot of research is going on this whole diverse topics. One of the very important statistic that is, being discussed and focused was the fact that globally, 75% of the health workforce are women at entry level.
Mhm.
But 25
Mhm.
years later, 75% of the leadership positions are with men. So, which means that these women who entered into this career in great numbers, either they have dropped out of their career for family priorities, not necessarily or very rarely because they were not good at the job, but really giving priority to family needs, to children, to elderly care, to attending to disability and sickness, those kind of issues. And or a primary reason is because women have opted to stagnate because they cannot take up a promotion or they cannot take up a transfer. And this has led to kind of, the leadership positions being completely, or rather, the majority being with men. And what was surprising again for me was as I listened to the research findings were this was not the story about India or Southeast Asia, but it was everywhere. Whether a North American person was presenting or a European person was presenting, the statistics were pretty much the same as far as women and health research or women in leadership in healthcare is about. So I think it's there. I came back and I remember going and meeting my vice chancellor, who is also a very, very strong, very dynamic lady. And I talked to her about how influential this conference, was to me personally. And she really encouraged me that why don't you take it forward and the conversations you've listened to there, why don't you do something in Chitkara within the campus or and I started doing that. And I think what I found very surprising was the receptivity of this kind of research, this kind of conversations, even among the group here. So while I was there, I had networked with several people, and one of them was Dr. Rupa Dutt. She's the founder of something called Women in Global Health, which is doing again an amazing set of work to kind of change the status quo. And I discussed with her about how can we bring this to India. And again, she was very motivating. And again, I would say due to coincidence, as it often happens, Dr. Rupa was visited India a couple of months later, and with the support of my vice chancellor, Dr. Madhu Chitkara, we could host her here and do a session of women in global health. What does it mean? And that was the initial kind of a setting to kind of start a Women in Global Health India. And then later, Dr. Rupa connected me with several others who are also very keen. And today, I'm one of the co founders of Women in Global Health India. The secretariat is from Chitkara School of Health Sciences. And this has been one outlet for me to take this work forward pan India level. And that's been very encouraging, to take up at a much wider scale. At the same time, to continue research to really produce evidence of which can perhaps help, you know, understand that this is how things are happening. How can we do it better? We also use the pandemic time and the whole online way of working to do a whole series of webinars which showcase what our frontline health workers, how their job responsibilities had changed, and connect them with policy makers. So we brought the ANMs, the ASHA workers, the self-help groups representatives. We had representatives from elected women, representatives like the Sarpanch or somebody who's at the block panchayat leader. And we connected them with policy makers via something like this, a Zoom perhaps. And that was very, very interesting because several of the frontline health workers came back and said, we never had an opportunity to sit across the table, so to speak, the virtual table. And there were people from so many parts of India. So that was a huge learning, and again, something to bring to forefront their issues, challenges, and how it can be addressed. Also, for facilitating cross learning, a sarpanch from Jammu Kashmir, sharing her experience with the sarpanch, whom our prime minister had interviewed in Man Ki Baat,
Mhm.
sarpanch Akila from Telangana. So I think it helped in a lot of ways. So I think this is how my story and my interest kind of just snowballed. Uh, yeah.
So, madam, even though when we talk about gender equity, it's a lot about uplifting women's status, women's socio-economic status. But I still believe there is certain role for men to play in this. Uh, do you also agree with this?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's possible without men, because if we try to do it as a women only, and considering that the world is filled with different gender, if all do not change the mindset and we only work on one group, nothing will change. So definitely, I think in this whole movement to say a term for it. I think men allies who believe that opportunity must be given based on capability. I am not really advocating a reservation system, a quota system to allow women
Mhm.
opportunity. Maybe in the beginning, all this reservation system or a quota system may help, but I think eventually what happens is once women taste that empowerment that they get through this and they do this kind of work, I think automatically you don't need the reservation. You just, you've done the stimulation, the ecosystem is getting changed. So this is
Mhm.
not a women's movement. We are talking about a movement for all. But in it, we are looking for a
Mhm.
more equitable opportunity, especially at leadership level. In case the reason of the women not getting selected is related to her gender, we would definitely like to remove those biases and barriers.
Mhm. So, ma'am, what is the role men have to play in this? Can you men have to play in this, and what is the role women have to play in achieving the gender equity? Can you focus a bit on that?
I think for men, it's kind of to understand first. So there is, I mean, I think for men and women, there's a part which is sensitization. What is this issue we're talking about? Why is this an issue? Is this an issue at all? If it is an
Mhm.
issue, how does it manifest?
Mhm.
And if it is manifesting, like for example, we use the term glass ceiling, right? So that's a manifestation
Mhm.
of an
Yeah.
issue wherein women, for whatever reasons, are not going upward. Now we need to kind of go into the root cause of it. When we go into the root cause,
Mhm.
I think the glass ceiling, the whole terminology exists, a lot of research is there on it, because there is a recognition that for whatever reasons, women are not going upward. There is some kind of an invisible barrier. Now, when we look into it, like I'm saying, the root cause of this barrier, how much is related to the individual, how much is related to organizational, or perhaps who is in the interview panel, what they are looking at. Is there some other kind of a network or some other parameter coming into play? So if the sensitization is there, that because a very, like in India, very common question is, if you're not married, you're always asked in interviews, oh, so you must be getting married soon, because that's kind of seen as, oh, you
Mhm.
might go away from this job. If you are newly married, the next
Mhm.
question comes, oh, you might be planning a child soon. Now, these are questions which, in a lot of
Mhm.
countries, you can't even ask in the interview. Now, here, these
Mhm.
questions are asked, and the basis of those answers, people decide whether the person should be hired into that position, and not necessarily on the basis of their capability, their education, prior experience, expertise,
Mhm.
etc. So, besides sensitization, if we understand that some of these barriers can be changed by men, then it would be good
Mhm.
to kind of advocate for that and make them aware that these kind of decisions happen. But it's not right.
Mhm.
It's also equally important to sensitize women on the same thing and to say that these barriers exist. But how do you not give in to those barriers? How do you overcome those barriers? How do you speak up? So I think that is like very important. So I think there's a lot. Like for
Mhm.
example, we hear the term about panel discussion, and panel
Mhm.
discussion ideally should have diverse set of members representing both the gender. But during the COVID time, one of the things we were seeing was a lot of panels were what is being called as manels, only men, not even a single lady in the panel. Okay. And then we look
Mhm.
at, okay, why didn't you, let's say we have talked to a few organizers and we ask them, why did you get a man? Or, I mean, why did you get only men? Why didn't you invite women? And the decision maker, maybe it's a man, and he would have just thought he has his network of people whom he can contact very easily and just contacted them, did not think
Mhm.
from this. So it was not intentional. Or maybe they thought, okay,
Mhm.
this is going to take place in the evening, and a woman, it may not be convenient for her to come. So, so then we had to call out when mammals were being introduced or were happening and say, aren't there women who could be invited? So I think that a lot of people who have kind of been sensitized to it. So when you see flyers, they kind of at least have that one women. And we're also saying, please don't put women into the panel who will be the moderator alone. The women can be the expert on the panel also. So we're also
Yeah.
saying, if you are not aware of a lady whom you can invite, do let us know. We can help you. I mean, there are people in India, there are enough and more women, wonderful women who are educated, working, and yeah, who are available for speaking on different panels. So, this is just an example. So what is it a man can do? So we would expect that a man would say, who's on the panel? And if they find there isn't a woman, they,
Mhm.
as the man, they as an expert, they could speak up and say, how come this is only men? Aren't there any other women? So not to do
Mhm.
panels and say, I will not participate if it is a manel. So this is just like one example I am giving. And of course, people have turned around and said that, well, how come you have only women panels? So we're not saying that's great
Mhm.
either. So we're saying, yeah, there should be diversity because the whole idea of a panel is to bring in different expertise, different perspectives, and that respect to the panel must be provided. So I think these two examples I gave was just to illustrate to your question about, what can men do or what can
Mhm.
women do. But then, yeah, you look around, there's so many different ways. But the idea is around the table, can we give opportunity to somebody who's not represented?
Okay. So, ma'am, slightly shifting from the topic that we were just discussing about gender equity. Uh, Now you have seen, you have been on both sides of the table. You are once a student, and now you are guiding so many students. What are those experiences as a student that you are carrying into your current role that is influencing how you behave with them, or how you discharge your duties, or how you mentor them? Were there any incidences as a student, even during PhD or while doing master in social work, that influence your current way you deal with your students?
So I definitely feel in my approach of being in an academic setup, while we are sensitive to all our different stakeholders, I definitely feel, the Chitkara University is very student centric, and we try to do our systems or our decision making. One of the key stakeholders we keep thinking about are our students. So definitely, that's a huge. It's a parameter of huge importance for me personally as well. During my school years, I would say I was lucky enough to be either at a topper in 12th, a head girl. In college, I stood for election. I was editor of my college for the student union election. So I've been through all of that. I was the topper in my college. So academically, I've always been, I think, fine. But there are always experiences which shape you. And I think being at Tata Institute of Social Sciences while I did my master's was another huge learning experience because, I mean, throughout your student journey, there'll always be something or the other which happens. And I think the fact that mentors are there kind of helps you. And I think when I went through, let's say, the teenage years, the adolescent years, where the maturity is at a different level, and I think it's teachers and mentors who kind of always keep you grounded and give you a different perspective than the one you were having. So, I might be very excited or hyper from one angle, and suddenly somebody gives you a different perspective. And then you're able to see the same situation in a different way. So the way I apply, even something like this is the fact that so many people, while I studied, listened to me, what my say in the whole story was. When matters are brought to me, it could be somebody, a senior colleague of mine who comes and says, this student misbehaved. I will always think that's only part of the story because I've not heard the student directly. And I always feel like there are two
Mhm.
sides of the coin. It's very important to listen to the different people involved to actually get the reality. Otherwise, one side will only
Mhm.
give you one perspective. And it is very important not to be swayed
Mhm.
by opinions. I think it's important to look at evidence, and where evidence is not there, we must listen to the different stakeholders, be it students, be it teachers, be it student friend, the student in trouble, their friend. So I think that kind of came from the fact that I felt that I've always had teachers who bothered about me, who bothered to listen to my side of the story, even if I got into trouble.
Mhm.
Second, I would
Mhm.
say is sometimes, I think every person grows up with some kind of dreams, and I certainly had my share of dreams growing up. And circumstances, different reasons, I've had to change also some of those dreams. And suddenly, when circumstances change beyond your control and you see something that you had hoped for not happening, I think teachers, guides, mentors, supervisors, they've helped me bounce back. quickly and come up with a new dream. So it doesn't matter that one dream got crushed. There's always the birth of a new dream, and I think the this whole I believe it is an important quality to be instilled in every student, the capacity to be resilient. That is, no matter how many times you go down, pick yourself up and go forward. I
Mm-hmm.
think I learned it
Mm-hmm.
in my school, in my college, and it stays with me today that it's not about when I go down, I pick myself up, but to also hopefully influence my students so that they pick themselves up and know that, failure is, it's okay. That's yesterday it happened, but today, you can think about a different future. So that's very important that I share that with students, and I think that also came from there. And the third I would like to share is I've had very, very powerful women leader, role model, I think, pretty much throughout my life. And perhaps that is the reason why, I want to work. I would like to do uh, something better. I would like to be in a more influential position, etc. It comes from being surrounded by, literally everywhere I have been. There have been very powerful women leaders, and because of that, I think one of the message I would give to my teachers and definitely to the students is, to the girls, it would be that, work, it's important. Stand on your own 2 feet. Don't be dependent, be interdependent, but, don't just think, okay, I got my degree and this is my certificate to help me get a better match in marriage, but rather to think that, even if, family definitely is a priority, but at the same time, I can contribute to the family better if I was working, perhaps. So I think to
Mm-hmm.
all the students, and I do several sessions to kind of get this point across to the students, because when they complete the degree, they are 21, 22. And I tell them that, do you still want to go back to your parents and ask, give me money because I want to buy you a gift on Mother's Day? Wouldn't it be better if you could earn your own money, even if it's something, so that you can at least buy your parents gift, or you can manage your own transportation and maybe even pay for your higher studies. Parents will always support. Parents are not, maybe in many families, parents may not really be asking children to work. So it's a new concept in some parts, but I think it's just very important. I think this has come from my own teachers and mentors, and like I said, supervisors. And it's not that it's only women. I've had very strong, very good men role models as well in my life, both from the family side as well as from the work areas. And I think the learning that I've had has also, I pass it on to my own students. It certainly
Mm-hmm.
influenced me to be more, I would say, not only student centric, but also help the students develop further. I'm very keen on that. Yes.
Mhm. So, ma'am, you just mentioned about the role of role models in your life. So, I would like to finish this podcast uh, with one question by asking you, who are those role models, if you can mention them, and maybe those incidences that shaped you while being with them. Uh,
So, like I said, I mean, I've had very powerful role models. The first person I probably would think about would be, besides some teachers in my schooling, like my maths teacher, Ms. Mutian, but also the principal, Ms. Devdas, and she was the principal of St. Hilda's, where I studied in Uti. It's a residential school. She was a phenomenal lady. The kind of exposure that I got in that school, if it's to teach us a fraction, she would bring sugar cubes into the class and then would teach us fractions using, so that it was very, very experiential way of learning. There were a lot of field visits, visits to different organizations. We would listen to constantly, I would say, a lot of very good messages. So, which makes our thinking a little higher. Then at plus two, I was with my principal was Mrs. Mary Roy. She's very famous in her own right in the school that I studied in Kerala. But she's also the mother of Arundhati Roy, the I'm sure everybody knows about Arundhati Roy, the author. But Mrs. Roy, I think, was a tremendous influence on all her students. And I just studied for such a short time with her. And yet, she influenced me a lot because I had done my plus two in science, and then I decided I am not doing, I'm not going for the typical engineering, medical kind of a thing, and I wanted to shift. And obviously, this was a very, very big decision. And she organized this really nice career guidance session. And when I went through that, I really felt, yeah, there are other career options I'm more interested in. I felt I got to know more about what's really out there. And she really helped me through that process, how to answer to people at home, how to just navigate my future. So I think I owe her a lot of, at the next step. Then I went into college, and there I had the principal there was Dr. Ramani Tarel. Again, a very, uh, I would say, yeah, influential lady, besides all the people who are my own teachers and heads of departments. In the sense, she was the one. I mean, I come from this really small town called Kottayam in Kerala, and that's where I did my college. And at that point, to aspire to go to TES is like big aspiration. You're in this small town and you want to go to Bombay to study. Um, yeah, it's just kind of like a more at a dream. But she constantly used to tell me that you can do it. And I remember meeting her before my interview. I was going for my TIS interview, and before that, I went to meet her. And she just made it sound like, oh, I know people who have gone there for interviews, and it's so easy. You can easily clear it. She was so confident. And I think a lot of that confidence, what she was showing, kind of really rubbed off on me. And I went for that interview like with like it's so easy to clear it kind of a feeling. So definitely, I think all these principles helped me go from one stage to the next stage. In TIS, I had my own supervisor at field visit, Dr. Pawar. He was, yeah, I think he helped me grapple with a lot of thinking that I was going through. You see, TIS is such a, I mean, till I went to TIS, I never had this amount of diversity in the class. I think in schools and all that, there is an amount of diversity, but it tends to be a certain homogeneous, at least maybe it's from a socioeconomic angle, or maybe it's from everybody's from the same town, or, and suddenly TIS was such a vastly different place with people thinking so many different types of thinking. So I think he helped me navigate it, and then my own heads, Dr. Vimla Nadkarni, Dr. Shubhada, they all helped me kind of figure out my next stages. And then finally, I graduated from TIS and I went for my final placement. And I was this person in the middle of Marathwada. I didn't know Hindi, I didn't know Marathi properly anyway. and kind of like a very unwanted person. And at that point, I think I was with the Institute of Health Management, Pachod. Dr. Nandita Kapadia was heading this team. It was an organization with Dr. Ashok Talchand that they had, and I think they both also gave me tremendously, a large amount of inputs, which my career kind of really took off with them, to aspire bigger, to.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I had a brief stint in Surat Medical College, but that was kind of like too brief. Again, there were powerful people there, but then my major stint was then with Aravind, right? So there, I mean, both Mr. Tulsi Raj and Dr. Nachyar, whom I directly reported to, they've just been really amazing. So I think throughout my life, I think I've been very, very lucky to have such good mentors. And now that I am here at Chitkara, we have, like I said, Dr. Madhu Chitkara, who's one of the founders. She's an extremely strong women role model. It's just amazing. So there's several people here who continue to be there, and my wish for everybody is to kind of proactively look for role models, proactively look for mentors, because I think getting that outside input, people, it will really help you. So I'm here only because I just received right guidance at the right time, and of course, I didn't really talk about my parents or my family or my husband, all of that. So it's not a gratitude speech out here, but I'm just seriously saying that I've really received a whole lot of encouragement at every point in life. And I would say, including from my children, in the sense, the other day, one of my classmates from Tish was telling me, I am leaving my job because my daughter said, I'm in 10th and I need you home. And I thought, my kids have never told me that. And I went back to my children and I said, it's not like you don't need me, right? So, uh, but I know, I think the children have kind of taken up a lot of responsibilities. I think they feel tremendous pride to see me follow what I am interested in and see where I am. And I sincerely hope I am a good role model, not just to my children, but to all the large number of students also. Yeah, that's what I would be thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, you are a great role model because during the IXL sessions, I used to really admire the way you delivered the sessions, and more importantly, the way you heard all the participants. So, in fact, it was great knowing that or in fact, getting reinforced that there are people who play a role in your life, and uh, there is something that we also need to do. So, ma'am, will come to end of this podcast. It was refreshing to hear your thoughts on gender equity and also knowing about your different experiences you have had throughout your life. So, thanks for sharing those with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Friends, this was Dr. Preethi Pradhan, Dean of Chitkara School of Health Sciences. She could reach where she is today because of her dreams, mentors who supported her, and the opportunities that she received. But there are people who are not as lucky as Dr. Preethi, as they get denied of the opportunities due to their gender and not because of their lack of competency. Today, just reflect if you are anyway contributing to this, and if yes, then what is that one small effort that you are willing to take to change it? Think about it and let me know through your voice messages. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast Life of a Researcher. So keep listening and goodbye until we meet next time with stories from one more researcher. Thank you.